Thank you for joining us today at Miniature Wargaming Labs. I'm James,
I'm Brian.
and today we're going to talk about one of Brian's favorite old new games. Brian, what are we talking about today?
So it's probably one of my favorite games. Definitely in the last couple of years, it's grown in popularity and just size of game. Um, we're talking about Frostgrave, the second edition. Of course, we'll be also comparing it to the first edition, which is also amazing. And I suggest
we've done the video on the first edition one because you can get that free now.
yes.
Now you've got to pay money. So we got to find out why we pay money for second edition.
Now, there's a big reason to pay money for second edition. First edition is really good and definitely a great starting game for anybody looking to get into miniature games. It's fast, it's simple, it's not really rules intensive, it's not miniatures intensive, which is everything that spells out a perfect beginner game. And it also has a high emphasis on role-playing, which is really good. It's kind of targeted at D&D 5th edition players because 5th edition has an emphasis on miniatures, and it's an open miniature game, so a lot of 5th edition players have a lot of miniatures, and if they're painted, or even if they're not painted, because, not everybody paints, it's a perfect segue into a miniature game if you don't want to, say, start BattleTech or Infinity or another miniature game out there.
Well, so let's say how much. So we already know Joseph McCullough made this game because
yes,
he has. I think he's more like Alexander Dumas. He must have like a group of writers that he hides in a barn who just crank out rule books for him, and then he just signs his name onto it.
I don't know how he does it. He has a new book announced every other week.
So this is $35. So we're gonna. One of the things I want to ask you is you're talking about the miniatures. So I've started reading through the rule book. $35 for this, and so looking at the Warband Creation, I can take a wizard. I get that for free. So then I don't have to buy an apprentice, but it's really recommended. And I get
it's
400.
Extremely recommended.
Yeah. And I was looking at the rules. It makes sense, and we can talk about that later. But you get 400 gold crowns, basically points to buy your crew. Apprentice costs 100. So I was looking at it. If I bought like a specialist knight, that's 125. So if I bought 2 of those, which I'm allowed to, because I can have up to 4 specialists in my gang crew. So I was looking at model-wise. I have 2 WizKit packs of the Dwarf Wizard and Dwarf Paladins. So right there, the one model in my Dwarf set would be my Wizard. The other one would be the Apprentice. The 2 models from the Paladin set, I'm already at 350 points. I've spent $10 on models, and I'm just 50 points short of filling out a full crew to start a game. So I can steal the little dog from the Monopoly set, and that's my Warhound. So I'm ready to go at a $45 investment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this game is extremely low bar. With the open miniature game, with the open miniatures, you really have access to if you're already playing miniature games, mostly the fantasy games, then you already have access to a lot of miniatures. But if you're new into miniatures or don't have any, or just like this is your first game, it's not hard to get the miniatures you need for a very affordable price. Now we did a episode a couple months ago about getting started for Frostgrave, and I showed a bunch of the WizKids, focused on the WizKids part, and you could get terrain, you can get enemies, you can get the book, and you can get a full warband. Max characters, everything you need to play for less than $100. So, it's not enough terrain to play the game, but you could also just use shoe boxes or cereal boxes. I used those for many years when I started playing miniature games. I started as a broke college student, so those are perfect for games. just use your imagination. It's little toys anyways, so perfect to do that. So this game really is accessible to everyone. It's not a high cost. It's not a high rule barrier. It's not a huge book. It's not an extensive history of lore that you need to learn in order to play the game. It's one of those games that I herald as the perfect starter game.
Yeah, so I know in our first edition look at this, we were talking about the investment. So the investment into the game isn't different from first to second edition. Now, I will say, as we've moved into second edition, we were talking about the Cromlech terrain, specifically,
which is beautiful.
It is beautiful terrain, but so in Frostgrave second edition, I don't know about first edition. McCullough goes over doing a 2x2 board, a 3x3, a 4x4. Was that from first edition?
It is. So in the book, it says the more terrain you have, the better the game will be. Mostly because archers are extremely good in this game, and having places to hide from them and making it harder for them to hit you is extremely useful. So the denser your board, the more it's going to be immersive because it feels like you're going through an abandoned city. With ruins and everything, and B, it's going to protect you from probably the strongest thing in the game, which is archers. Which, I mean, in any fantasy-based game, ranged weapons are always going to be more dangerous than close combat because, you know, there's no guns, so you're not shooting. Not everybody has access to bolters or HMGs like other games. So, you know, that long range really does a lot in the game. So having all that terrain keeps you protected from that.
All right. So mechanics-wise, what was changed from going from first to second edition? Because I know we addressed some of the issues with like balance, especially over long-term campaigns.
So balance was a big thing for Joseph. He really went through and fixed it in one of the campaigns. The campaign system in the first book was really geared towards aggressive wizards. So if you were in a campaign and you chose something that wasn't doing damage to other people with your wizard, you're not going to get as far as other wizards. You got more points from destroying characters and models with your wizard than you did with other models. So if you took a elemental wizard, you just fire blasted everything and firebombed everything, and you just grow exponentially while other people are just trying to catch up. Now, in one of his campaigns later, he went through and fixed that and took that away and really made it so that all wizards can get the same amount of points in the same amount of time. So he kind of took that, tweaked it a little bit from what that second kind of system was and put it into the second edition. And it really does make a long-term campaign really balanced. Another thing he did is went through and added a balancing scenarios. So if you do go and play a campaign, there'll be wizards that get more treasure, which is how you get ahead, and you also win games, which means you'll get more experience. So there'll be wizards that will be ahead of other wizards in the campaign. So there's ways to add more creatures to balance the table so that it's harder for the higher level wizard to get to the treasure than it is for the lower level wizard. Now, the higher level wizard will have more ways to work around that, but that's exactly it. So they'll be using more of their resources to get to the place where the lower level wizard will be using this less resources, but it evens out. So it really balances out a lot of the campaign stuff and a lot of the single scenarios as well.
All right. So one of the things I like about it is building the warband. Now, is the construction of the warband similar from first until second?
It's very similar. So one of the big things in the first edition is there was nothing as a specialist. You had a list of soldiers that you can take that costed different gold points. So you had a thug who cost 20 gold. You had a war dog that cost 20 gold. You had a thief that cost 50 gold. And then you had the more trained soldiers, such as a knight, which cost 100, or a longbowsman, which would cost 100, or a sharpshooter with a crossbow, which would cost 100, or treasure hunter. All of them, the 100 costed ones were a lot better than their 50 and 20 counterparts, but also would aid into your points. Now, that only mattered in the first time you built a warband. So going into a campaign, the more and more stuff you got, the more and more treasure you got, the more experience you got, you're just going to fill out your roster with a whole bunch of high-level soldiers. You're going to have all those 100-costed ones, and you're going to overtake the board easily because they all have better armor, better weapons, more skills. So what they did, what Joseph did, is he took it from being able to take any of them to being able to take only 4 specialists, or several specialists. I can't recall the number of the actual. I think it's 4 or 5.
Yeah,
and
4 specialists, 4 regular soldiers.
Yes, yeah. So it would become a warband of 10. So you have the apprentice, the wizard, 4 regular soldiers, and then 4 specialists. So really separating that out really balances everything out, because now the person that's head, even though you can afford all the specialists, well, you could still only have 4. So that really balanced out a lot of things. It really makes you think about what you put into your warband. So it really made the game a lot more balanced in the warband creation going into the game.
So looking at it, because I noticed the tables for soldiers and then specialist soldiers, you could only take 4 of each at max.
Yes.
But there were more than 4 options on those tables.
Oh, there's, I think there's more than 10 for each.
Yeah, so you've really got to pick it. And it's not like Reality's Edge or Necromunda or Kill Team, of where, you know what, I shouldn't have bought that knight. I really needed a treasure hunter. Well, I'll take the knight off my active roster and have him sit back, and I'll just go and... No, if you want a new one, you got to drop someone from the schedule. There's no...
Where someone has to die. League. Yeah, there was... in some of the campaigns, you can have a keep, a stronghold, and you can have a couple extra people there. But, I mean, I think it's like 2 to 4 extras. But, yeah, no, usually you have to wait until one of them dies, and then you have to replace them. But if, like, there's the injured, so if they get injured and they're not in the next game, you can't replace them because they're not dead. So you're just down a person. So that really makes it really have to think what you're going to do. Do I throw in an apothecary so that I can have a healing potion at the beginning of the game? Yes, it's really good to have a healing potion, but the apothecary is not really good at anything else, and that's a specialist slot. Do I take an archer? Well, yeah. Do I take a cheap archer or an expensive one? Or a specialist one? The specialist one's going to be really good, but it's also going to cost a lot, where the low-costed one is going to be not as good, but easily replaceable. So there's a lot of options that you have to think about, and what you're going to put in, what you're going to take out or what's going to happen if one of them dies, and if you're going to replace it with the same thing. It changes when you go through a campaign, and first game, it's easy, you just go with whatever's good, but then 4th game down the road, well, everybody might have an apothecary and you don't, and everyone has archers and you had one. So, well, you're kind of getting shot out of the water.
Well, so from first to second, are there any new unique mechanics that got added to the game?
So I think there was a lot of just fixing up of everything, cleaning up the system. There wasn't a lot of new mechanics. A lot of things made optional, and the balancing mechanics were worked out. But off the top of my head, I can't recall anything new. Which is, I mean, good when you go to from a first to second edition. It's just a cleanup, balancing everything. Now, the biggest thing that was redone was the spells. So every spell was reworked, reworded, balanced, because some of the elemental spells were just extremely good with no drawbacks. You could take out an entire group. I remember just using Elemental Blast and you just blast people. You hit 3 of them at a time, and you just win games. Now, he went through and really balanced everything out, rethought about how each spell interacts with the game, and made those spells that were less used and the wizard schools that were less used more viable, and the ones that were overused and really powerful less so, and more fun and balanced. And now taking a witch is decent, or a thaumaturge, or an oromancer, instead of taking an elemental wizard. So really made it so that whatever you want to play is what you should play, because all of the wizard schools are good, and all the spells are balanced.
So something I noticed going through the 10 wizard options is that they have spell schools that represent their choice, but they have to take spells from aligned schools,
mm-hmm.
and then they have an oppositional school. Was that always?
Yeah, that was included in the first one. So you have the allied schools, which is a -1 or 2 to your roll, where the opposition one was like a -5 or 6, somewhere up there. It was a higher negative to casting spells. Now, you could learn any spell in the game, and you could also upgrade spells by leveling them up, which leveling up just makes them 1 less to cast, or gives them a +1 to cast when rolling. So if you have something that's from an opposition school, it's -10 to roll. You can level that up over time and make it a -5, which makes it really good, because then you're casting spells outside of your wheelhouse and are able to do something that wizard school isn't able to do. So it really makes it so that you could learn any spell in the game, but makes it harder to cast them, depending on what you take.
So I think you were saying before that the only physical asset that didn't survive the transition from first to second was the spell cards.
Yes. So if you are like me, you bought every single book. Every single Frostgrave book, every single Frostgrave item. I mean, I even have the storybooks. Yeah, I really like Frostgrave. You will be able to use every single one of those. The only thing that didn't make it over, didn't cross the Rubicon, was the spellbook cards, which is sad, but also, makes sense. There was a lot of spells that were not balanced well. So seeing that as the only thing that you might have to put away, lock it in the vault, it's not bad. I could go back and pull any of the campaign books and play them with first or second edition rules. because that's at the end of the day, they're just scenarios. They're not rule books. Now, the second edition book does go through and tell you what to fix, what to update in each of the supplementary books. So some of the soldiers got updated. Some of them are now specialists. So each book added new soldiers. And of course, with the new updated soldiers, some are going to be specialists, some are going to be basic. So it goes through and tells you which ones are different. There's some little things that it says, okay, ignore this, use this, but it's 2 pages out of this book. That is the appendix for the Frostgrave books. So there's not much to fix.
Now, you mentioned scenarios a couple times. How many scenarios are in the second edition, and are they the same as the first edition?
So in the first edition, there were 10 scenarios. All of them were great scenarios. I loved every single one of them. I think 1 or 2 of them got replaced, but in the second edition, make the book bigger, double down 2 times. There's 20 different scenarios. I know from looking it over, there was at least 8 or 9 that were exactly the same from the 10 from the first edition. So if you've played through the first 10 in the Frostgrave first edition book, you'll be very familiar with the ones in the second edition. Plus, there's 10 more that you haven't seen before.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the book right now. You're right. There's 20 in there.
Yeah.
That's way more than you had in Oathmark.
Oh, yes. It's really awesome. I mean, that was the big expansion in this book, was just adding 10 more scenarios. I think that's where all the extra pages came from, actually. Because I was trying to, going through the different each book, I was trying to find what the big differences were. The spells take up the same amount of space. The spell cards take up the same amount of space. The soldiers were kind of expanded. The rules there's a little more explanation on the rules, which is really nice. That added a couple pages. There's more how to balance things, which added a couple pages. But I think the biggest page boost was from the 10 extra scenarios, which is I'm okay with. If I'm going to pay $10 extra for 10 extra scenarios and updated rules and everything, sounds good to me.
Well, so we were talking about earlier off camera, the Cromlech terrain. Didn't you say the Cromlech terrain is actually designed to fit certain scenarios?
Yes, so some scenarios in the book require special terrain. There's one with living statues. There's one with a tower that has 2 opposite towers from it. And so some of this terrain is harder to build or harder to find in other terrain lines. So Cromlech came along and made terrain for it. Now, the terrain is absolutely amazing. It's MDF. It's absolutely great. I'm going to get some myself. It's just a little expensive, but it is specifically made. The ones I'm going to get are the ones for scenarios. The extra stuff, I already have a lot of stuff already based on Felstad, but the scenario stuff is kind of really nice to have because it builds that it's a specific piece for the scenario, especially like the tower one. So the scenario has a tower in the center of the map, and then it has 2 other smaller towers on the side. And once you get into the tower, you can't use magic. So having that's one of the harder things to make or find in the terrain world is towers connected to other towers. So having that made is absolutely amazing. Also, the museum, which is a specific size with a specific amount of statues. That one's also a nice one to grab. If you can afford them, definitely get them. They're really nice, really great to add to your collection of terrain. They paint up really good, really nice looking. And Cromlech is just a great business.
Yeah, and I think Badger Games is a distributor in the U.S. I don't know if they're carrying everything in the line, but yeah. So I was looking at that because I have the 3D printer, but I was looking at the cromlech and saying, okay, yeah, this stuff looks nice, and I don't think there's any files that match the scenario specific pieces out there.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was looking at the cost of the cromlech items, and then McCullough's recommendation for how much terrain should cover your table, I think I asked you, and you figured it out. It was like $400.
It was close to $500 to get enough terrain to build out a generic table for Frostgrave. If you're buying from Cromlech, which, I mean, you're buying quality terrain. So you get what you pay for sure. But there's just a lot of cheaper alternatives to go for. Definitely, they're great for supplementing. They're, like I said, the ones that I would grab are the ones that are the specific ones, just because A, they're really good terrain, and B, they have very specific purpose. But yeah, it is grabbing all the Frostgrave specific terrain is really expensive.
All right. So since we talked about the scenarios, I was looking at the book. And there's an option rule called scenario balancing. And so let's ask about balancing scenarios in campaign play, because that was one of the big complaints about first edition, is if you're in a campaign with someone and they chose necromancer or elementalist, and then you could actually run into a situation of a runaway group, like the runaway power, like one group just becomes unstoppable.
Oh, yeah.
Been fixed in the second edition campaign?
Yes. So the balancing feature adds in wandering monsters, and they're focused on the side of the board that the higher level player is on. So they're having to expend their resources not only fighting you and the terrain, but also fighting wandering monsters that are going specifically at them.
Now, does the opponent control those monsters?
So it's all there's a list of what they'll do in the book. So you'll roll, and it depends. So if they can't see anybody, they'll either just like move or go towards an exit or an entrance to certain things. If they do see a specific person, they'll start heading towards it. If they're within combat range, they'll initiate combat. If they are more intelligent, they will seek out opponents. But each one has like a chart of what is going to happen when you have a wandering monster. So like zombies will just shamble around until they see somebody. But vampires will specifically seek somebody out. So depending on what is out on the fields, it can be very dangerous. So I've seen skeletons crit somebody off the table, and they're 2 wound little chumps. So I mean, it's any extra bodies on the table is a chance for you to get killed in this game.
All right, so now that we've made the crossover from first to second edition, we already know he has another expansion book on the horizon. Because I guess Stargrave didn't take up enough time, and working on his second expansion to Oathmark was too easy. And
whatever else he's writing.
What is it? Something with a lich. What's the new expansion?
It's the red. It's not the Lich, because the Lich was already done.
Okay.
What is it? The red. Is it the red sarcophagus? I don't. Something with red.
Okay. All right. So let's. So where do you hope he goes with this expansion? Because we already know in the past he did the Red Lich and he did Archipelago. So where are you hoping he expands in the future? Because even with those expansions, he modified the rules, so that it's been a slow transition from first into second.
Yes, yeah. Each supplement added something new to the game, fixed something from the original book. He's really good at realizing what he missed and what is missing from his games, which is, a trait of a really good game maker. He can look at his game and it's like, well, this is missing, this is really unbalanced, and so instead of waiting until the next edition, I'm just going to fix it in the next book. It's going to be a $10 book, and you're going to get new rules in it that'll make everything better. Really good. And then he just compiles it in the second edition book, which is really good. He's also one of the fastest and probably the most prolific game writer right now. As a singular person. So he's going to expand a lot faster than I can think of anything to add. I think I talked about it before, but I would love to see some like Sky Pirates type thing, like ship battle or like
Caradron Overlords.
Yeah, floating cities. That would be super cool. Or maybe I don't know. There's a lot you could do in this world, but the Frostgrave Ghost Archipelago, that was a really, really great thing. There's pirates, there's dinosaurs, there's lost treasure. That is amazing. Maybe something like more like gothic themed, like vampire themed. I mean, Falstad has vampires, but like maybe like an Innistrad or
well, Oathbreakers is basically undead for his Oathmark, his full rank and file battle game.
Yeah,
so he hasn't done a Halloween version of Frostgrave.
He is not. But I mean, he does so much that whatever I think of that I want him to do, he's either already done it and it's going to come out next year. It is 20 books that he publishes monthly, or it's going to be in a supplemental magazine that the 50 that he writes for. So really, there's just a lot that I would take this, but he's already thinking of that too. So that's why I think Frostgrave is absolutely amazing, is because as soon as I'm like, that would be cool to look at. Oh, you want to play dragons? Here's my magazine. It includes dragons. It's like, oh, you want to do firearms? Oh, here's my magazine. It has firearms.
Well, he did that with one of the War Games Illustrated. He did like a Treasure Island inspired one.
Yeah.
Where one of the pirates like had the 7 dead men on a dead man's chest. They're actually like 7 skeletons around the treasure.
Yeah.
And he controlled them as like basically the wizard character, and he had like his little flintlock. I remember that one.
Yeah, so I mean, with how prolific he writes and how much he writes, this game is going to go in many, many directions, and it's going to be around for a while. Definitely why it's top 3, if not my top game of all time.
Well, so that's why I was telling you, like, with those 2 packs of WizKids in this book, that would pretty much build out a war crew for a $45 investment. You can't even buy. Can you buy any PS2 games for $45? Let alone like PS4.
The really cheap used ones that lose their fun after turning them on.
There's got to be one of the lowest cost buy-in skirmish games out there.
Oh yeah, I mean, you look at like even one of the cheaper ones like BattleTech, or I mean, not really Infinity anymore. It's kind of a high input. Maybe some of the indie ones match up to it, but for as prolific and as expanded as Frostgrave is, it is the easiest and cheapest game to get into.
Planet 28, that's the one you were thinking of.
Planet 28, yeah, that one's less than, you start playing for less than $15, so that one's definitely on top of my list of cheapest games to play.
I think that's what you're trading off, since Osprey Games backs Frostgrave.
Yes.
You can go more places to find people who play Frostgrave.
Yes.
Than something else.
I mean, Planet 28 is really easy. If you have 10 miniatures, you can play with 2 people. You don't have to worry about having players as long as you have a friend that is interested in playing. Frostgrave is a little more involved, and so having people that are actually playing and like involved in the game is good. It's also really easy to build a community around Frostgrave because it is so much fun.
All right, so let's discuss why shouldn't you play this game.
So like we went over, it's a skirmish game. So I know I've talked to people that don't like skirmish games because they want to be the war master. They want to control thousands of models and push them to victory in a war of attrition. So people like that aren't made or aren't the target of Frostgrave. Frostgrave is for the people that want to have a fun time. It is definitely more of a beer and pretzels game. It's rules light. It's more of, you could definitely take it in our role playing area. I've definitely thought about if we weren't in quarantine, doing a D&D campaign based in Felstad, and whatever we're doing outside of battle is done role playing, and then once we get to battling wizards, then we take it to the tabletop. You could totally do that.
That is one thing that I think, because Frostgrave really looks like it's designed to capture the D&D 5th edition people.
Yes.
And then move them over. But when you move from combat in an RPG using D&D 5th edition to Frostgrave, you do lose a lot of that granularity.
Yes.
Because you're taking out the DM. So your choices on armor are heavy and light.
Yep.
Your weapon is 2-handed, 1-handed. There's no like, well, I want a scimitar and I get my bonus because I'm a ranger with a light sword in one hand. So you lose a lot of that customization and granularity because you're moving to a higher abstraction, but that allows you to remove the DM. And the DM...
Exactly.
Of course, you're taking away the DM's being nice to you because he rolls a 20 and lies and says it was a 5 and you get to survive. That doesn't happen in Frostgrave. So
that doesn't happen in Frostgrave. Let's turn on the crits and watch people get shot off the table when they just entered.
The DM's conscience is removed as a moderator in the game.
Yes. And you get cold, hard dice.
So we'll wrap it up with why should you play Frostgrave, your elevator pitch.
Frostgrave is the perfect game for anybody looking to get into miniature gaming. It's a low entry point, not a lot of money. It's not a lot of rules. It's rules light. It's a lot of fun. It's easily augmented to your certain play style. It's highly modular, so you could definitely change how it plays depending on what you want to do. It's also highly expanded. It's not like you get the book and that's it. No, there's 10 books already made, and there's a magazine series already on this game. So it's not like there is actually a miniatures selection specifically for the game from Nick Ayer's North Star. Yeah, North Star Miniatures. So if you are looking to get into a established miniature game or a miniature game that is easy to get into, or if you're looking to move from RPGs to miniature games, this is absolutely the perfect game.
Yeah, I agree with that. I have to admit, the whole show has been why you should play Frostgrave. So it's a little unfair.
I mean, I've convinced a lot of people to play Frostgrave in my days because, and none of them have regretted it because it is such a good game.
I think what the actual combat discussing the target number is just one page. He spent more time discussing how to move through water than how to... Which he says
movement
really
is
here.
more involved than combat in this game, which is absolutely amazing. It's one die roll. I don't have to roll for I hit. Okay. Did I damage? Okay. Did I? How many wounds? Okay. Did the wounds actually go through? It gets rid of all that. It's one roll. Did I do it? Cool. We did the thing. Let's move on.
Oh,
It's like I said. It is a really good Baron Pretzel's miniature game.
and something I was thinking about is no one actually listens this far into the show, so I just
Yeah.
throw this out here. But the new Warcry set, Catacombs,
Oh
you buy the
yeah.
terrain board separately. So if you bought 2 of those terrain boards, you'd have underground passages. So you wouldn't have to buy terrain because, well, there's a wall that would obstruct the line of sight, which
Yeah.
play. And then I was thinking, who makes those flip books? The big giant map flip books for
Oh.
D&D. They have like the big format one and the little.
Yeah, I
You have
have
one.
one. I have one around here somewhere. I don't know where though. It's around here somewhere.
That's got some 2D abstraction of like ruined towers and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
because so they have the little one. They have like it's like this big. It's super small. It flips open to like this big. And I was actually making a miniature game based off of that book. But the bigger ones, yeah, it's. I mean, I think the biggest one is going to be like maybe a 1.5 by 1.5 board, which is a little small, but doable, completely doable if you have small warbands.
Yeah, because I think on Tabletop is doing a review like that. Like they got the big format and the small format and actually showed that they were designed to be pushed together.
Yes.
So if you started going off in a different direction, you could just like flip the page and like move it around.
Yeah, and then you have like the little one, like so the one I have is the smallest one, and it's like a bunch of hallways. So you have like the hallway connecting them, and you could have like a hallway connect, and then you just have like a whole like complex with these books, which is super cool. I mean, I really dig those books. And if you also play Planet 28, there is a sci-fi version of those books. So there's also that.
Okay.
Or if you want to do sci-fi fantasy and just take Frostgrave into space, which spoilers coming out soon.
Like Space Grave or something out there.
Yeah.
That'll be a later episode.
yes, it will.
All right. Well, I think that's it for this episode. So thank you for joining us at Miniature Wargaming Lab. I'm James.
I'm Brian.
And we'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching.